coming. Before anything, if you have a cell phone, turn it off, turn it down, vibrate. I always tell the story. I was at church once, right before communion. DC, Highway to Hell came on. I didn't go to church for the next 3 weeks. Before we get to our distinguished speaker, a few other things to take care of. Our next speaking presentation will be August 20th. It'll be Scott Herring, and this time he's going to talk about the trains of the anthracite region, the last of the anthracite photographers. All our shows start at 7 o'clock here, unless duly noted. October 22nd, we have attorney Ed Brennan talking about the Supreme Court case of Minersville versus the Gobiduses about not having to stay pledged to the allegiance to the flag. November 8th is the celebration of Minersville Historical Society's 20th anniversary. We're going to have wine and cheese and an open house from 2 to 4 at the History House on 3rd Street. And on December 13th, Alan Arts will present an organ concert and Christmas carols sing benefiting the Minersville Historical Society on a magnificent organ at Trinity Episcopal Church, South Center Street, and Howard and Oxford. But we'll be having posters and announcements out for that. Well, with another distinguished presentation, Mr. Pat Reynolds. As a kid growing up in Minersville, Reynolds was fostered early love of comics. He emulated illustrators of his favorite EC comic releases, including Tales of the Crypt, Two-Fisted Tales, and Frontline Combat. He used to draw his own comic book stories. He would present them to EC Comics. He idolized the Atlas Publishing Company, but he got rejection letter after rejection letter after rejection letter. But if you didn't realize till later that each rejection letter was signed by Stan Lee of Spider-Man, name and everything else. So it's probably
gets shot down by a beacon.
he probably has a fortune in signatures. In the mid-60s, Reynolds studied at the Pratt Institute in New York City, where he focused mostly on illustrations. He stuck to illustration later while earning his MFA at Syracuse University. He studied with popular illustrators at the time, such as Isidore Seltzer, a regular contributor to the Sesame Street magazine. In between Pratt and Syracuse, Reynolds enlisted in the Army. He was sent to the intelligence school at Fort Holabird in Baltimore. He went on to fly 300 missions in Vietnam and earn 11 air medals and a Bronze Star medal. Reynolds thought the Army would be a short interlude, but it became something of a career. He ended up retiring from the reserves in 1994 at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. All the while, Reynolds would continue to write, illustrate, and publish comics. He had 3 different historical comic strips syndicated in newspapers across the country. Mr. Reynolds began with the Pennsylvania Profiles in 1976. The strip ran for 15 years. It focused on the little-known moments in the Pennsylvania history and was delivered in a casual and often humorous tone. And I was a teacher for 41 years, and I used to use them to teach my elementary students because they were comic books.
Smart man.
His best-selling book, which he shares the name of the comic, is the collection of Pennsylvania Profiles, which has sold more than 20,000 copies. Mr. Reynolds has always had a fascination with regional history. Through regional doesn't always mean near his own hometown. He even wrote and illustrated a strip called Texas Lore. He also began a Washington, D.C. based strip called Flashbacks, which still runs today in the Washington Post and other papers. For his current strip, he is in the middle of telling the story of the Black Bicycle Corps, which began in the late 1890s as an experiment to see if the cavalry could replace horses with bicycles. His tagline that he still uses today is, "I'm always working on the next one down the line." And he is also a lad that survived 4 years of my father's high school teaching. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pat Reynolds.
Make something to live up to that, so I better know what I'm doing. One of the things I will talk about I get a chance, is, I'll start with the Declaration of Independence, which is what I've originally stated to do. Then I'll get into my battle with politically correctness and conclude from there. Anyway, Declaration of Independence. Why? Why do we need it? And the whole concept was a novel concept. The Revolutionary War was going on for a whole year before the idea of independence ever came into anybody's mind. It wasn't until Thomas Paine came up with this pamphlet in January of 1776 called Common Sense, where he introduced the idea of breaking away from Great Britain. By the way, when Paul Revere came in his famous ride, he didn't say the British are coming, because everybody considered themselves British. He said the regulars are coming, so get out of the way. So when the Declaration of Independence was a very wild concept. You had Eastern United States consisted of 13 colonies, 13 different countries. And the idea of even just two getting together to form a country was really bizarre. Now we got 13 getting together, which happened in Philadelphia in 1776. And so they wrote the Declaration. And it was the Declaration was written out of necessity. We needed allies. And we had to prove to the rest of the world that we've broken away from the mother country. So then they decided, Congress passes a resolution around July 2nd or so, that we're going to have it embossed. Oh, first of all, the Declaration was printed by an outfit owned by a guy named Dunlap, the Dunlap Printing Company, and they were printed on broadsides. They were about 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, and they were distributed. 20 years go by, early 2000s, a guy is down at Reynolds market, he's shopping for a frame, finds this picture frame, beautiful, takes it home, takes the backing off it, and there's a piece of paper stuck on the inside. He opens it up, it's a Dunlap broadside, one of only about 26 left. He eventually sold it to Norman Lear, the family producer from Hollywood, for $7.1 million. So it shows you what somebody's worth. So anyway, the Declaration was then embossed. Why did the embossing? Back then, if you wanted, it had no typewriters. If you wanted to send a diplomatic message, you hired a professional calligrapher. By the way, to this day, the White House employs 3 professional calligraphers. You go down there for a dinner, when you sit at one of the formal dinners, you sit at the table, you're going to have a name tag in front with your name on it. That was lettered by one of the White House calligraphers. They make just shy of 6 figures, the 3 of them, each. So anyway, so they decided to have it embossed. The reason they had it embossed was because it would gain, in a word it says, we're really serious about this. So we went to the expense of getting it hand lettered. The guy that did the hand lettering was a guy named Timothy Matlack from Philly. And then he lived for a time in Lancaster, PA, and his main job, he started out as a kid, and he was very talented at this. So Ben Franklin hired the guy to do diplomatic messages to other parts, international messages. So anyhow, Matlack then retired and lived in my hometown, which is now Lancaster, PA. there are no historical markers to this poor guy anywhere for the part he played in our history. Anyway, when the Declaration was, when they finally decided to declare independence, they formed a committee of a bunch of guys. Sherman, Livingston, and Ben Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. And they decided someone has to come up with the wording of it, to write the thing. So they picked Thomas Jefferson because he's from the South. And he could more identify with the Southern way of life. Also, he owned a bunch of slaves. And he had one of them living with him, taking care of his needs at the at this apartment house he lived in a couple of blocks from Independence Hall. This kid's name was
Sally Hemings? Sally Hemings?
Hemings. That's
Sally
his last
Hemings,
name.
yeah.
He was the brother. Anyway, so the Declaration starts with, it has three parts. Top part is the introduction, and that's where Jefferson gets rather flowery, and he quotes a lot of the great philosophers of the time, like John Locke, and then the second part is the large part. That contains the 56 grievances of why we want out, why we want to have our own country. And you know, some of those grievances did not apply to Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania was a proprietary colony. So was Maryland. And that meant that the King of England wanted so bad to get rid of holier than thou Quakers and the Catholics that he says, what will it take? William Penn, he was a lawyer, this is the old man, and he had just represented the Calvin family, the founders of New Jersey. He's just keeping up. And he looked across the river and said, beautiful piece of land. So the king really couldn't afford to pay it. So, and he says, no problem, I'll take it in land. So that's how we got Pennsylvania. And a lot of the first settlers were Welsh. So when Penn was getting the charter from the king, Penn wanted to name it New Wales. And the king said, nothing doing. We're gonna name it after you, Pennsylvania. So that's how the state line's named. Anyway, so now we're going on to the Declaration. It contained those three parts. The last part was just a conclusion of the whole thing. And I mentioned how it was then embossed. And then from there on, the Declaration took off, literally took off, because the British were moving in on Philadelphia in 1776. So they put the Declaration in a wagon, and they moved it to my hometown, Lancaster, overnight, over to York, crossed over the Susquehanna River. It stayed there for about 9 months or so. Then in 1783, the Declaration came back to Philadelphia, and next thing you know, the veterans from the Revolutionary War set themselves on a strike and a demonstration against the government for the back pay serving in the Revolutionary War. So the Declaration took off, and it was moved across the creek to New Jersey and the state of New Jersey, Nassau all for a while. And then in 1783, it was moved to Annapolis, Maryland, and then up to the Old Stone Church in Trenton. The thing kept going back and forth. And so then finally, Congress decides to have a permanent site for the Capitol, and it gets moved to Washington, D.C. But it was under the auspices of the Secretary of State who had responsibility of it. And then the War of 1812 broke out, and the British were marching on Washington. And Jolly Madison is famous for saving the poor George Washington. But a guy, a clerk in the Secretary of State's office is one of the few guys who are left there. And everybody's evacuating. We noticed on the wall the Declaration of Independence in a frame. He took it down, put it in a wagon, went with it. And they went all the way up north of Washington and crossed over what was known as the Chain Bridge into Leesburg, New Jersey. And there they stashed it in they arrived at what was known as Rockaby Mansion. And they stashed it in the cellar for a couple of years. It stayed there until peace was restored. And so anyway, eventually Daniel Webster becomes the Secretary of State, and he puts the Declaration on display at the U.S. Patent Office building on G Street in 7th Avenue. And they hung there for 35 years. And meanwhile, President Grant moves the Declaration to the Expo out in Chicago. No, the Philadelphia Expo. And people there notice he's in a lousy condition. And so it comes back to D.C. and Grover Cleveland becomes president, and he locks it away because of the condition of the Declaration. It stays locked away until 1920, and then the State Department declares it in fairly good shape, and that's when they build a special container for the Declaration. It's a hermetically sealed box, and it consists of two parts. One part, the frame is made of alloy, titanium, and aluminum. And then between two sheets of glass, but there's an 1/8 of an inch space between both sheets of glass. And that's filled with argon gas. And the place is hermetically sealed. And now it's in this case. And you can see the case. It was first at the Library of Congress for many years. And then they built the Archives building, and it was moved to the Archives building. Now you're gonna move the Declaration with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, these valuable documents. So just imagine the Secret Service protection of presidents. These documents got twice, 10 times as much protection, because they're put in these steel frames. They're put in a tank, actually an armored personnel carrier. The guys who maintenance on that did a lousy job, because the first APC broke down within a block, so they had to move the Declaration to another APC. So it gets moved from up at the Library of Congress, down Pennsylvania Avenue to the new Archives building. And on the rooftop, almost shoulder to shoulder, were guys with Thompson submachine guns loaded. And just for show, they had all of the armed forces, men and women, parading in front and behind this grand parade. And then it arrives at the Archives building, they're moved inside and put on display. When the display opened, President Harry Truman was there, Chief Justice Vinson, all of the big shots of the government were there for the unveiling. And that's where it stands today. But it's still in that hermetically sealed case, steel closed. And when you go see the Declaration, it's in this kind of a structure. And when the place closes down at night, two big doors close in on the declaration. When the floor opens up with an elevator, and it gets lowered 40 feet into another kind of a safe structure, and that's locked up. So if you see that movie, this moronic movie with Nicolas Cage, that is such a lot of crap. It didn't take place. So, it's really, well protected. So anyhow, during World War II, the declaration was taken to a safe place, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Stayed there throughout the entire war. And then it eventually moved to where I told you about. That case that it's held in takes two people to live in. So that was it for you. Any questions, because it'll be a quiz. My battle with politically correctness. Like I said, I do several of these series. So one time when they're putting the book for me, I thought it'd be great if they're used in the schools. So I put together a whole bunch of stories in chronological order, and I took it down to the Philadelphia School District, and they have a committee there for various math. So I was there to address the social studies committee. And this is Spike. So anyway, I'm giving this presentation. This takes the history of Pennsylvania from the days of the dinosaurs up through the Indians and then through the explorers. One of the ladies who highly educated person says, "Do you use that term?" I says, "What term? What? What?" Yeah. Native Americans. At that point, I knew I was toast. I'm gonna go out in style. I go, son of a bitch! I gotta change the names of one of the chapters to the goddamn French and Native American War. Walk down. Years later, I can tell you, I do a series on Texas. Texas has a really regimented way of teaching history, and every textbook there has to get the State Department of Education okay. And here, some genius down there, which is credit, finds my series on Texas, and he puts together 83, selects 83 stories, and contacts me with the manuscript, here, we're going to offer you a hefty 5-figure sum. All I got to do is sign the paper, and they'll take care of the rest. I wrote it back. I says, "No. Look at what you're offering me. You're not going to change any of that politically correct nonsense. Native Americans, it stayed. They're Indians. They stay Indians." Oh, by the way, I was on a press tour of Texas years after. In the meanwhile. And we went to a reservation, and I met the top chief of the Apache Nation, tall, handsome guy named George. I said, "George, what do you prefer? To be a Native American or Indian?" He said, "Let me tell you something. I'm proud to be an Indian." So I wish I was there to tell these people that same thing. Anyway, the book gets published. And not a word was changed. It was the same, but they changed the drawings. How do you change the drawings? Well, during the development of Texas, in very early stages, like in the early 1800s, they allowed a bunch of guys come in, and they were known as the impresarios. And they settled a few places. Later on came Sam Houston and, anyway, these other guys came in. First guys were impresarios, real rugged guys. Like they picked those guys on the horseback, cigarettes, see what's coming. The book comes out, they took the cigarettes out of their mouths. Nothing. We also had expeditions come up from Mexico, because Texas was a province of Mexico at the time. And these expeditions consisted of explorers and a lot of clergy who were going to convert natives. And then they came back and reported. So I have this one expedition come back reporting to the viceroy. That's the head guy of all of the colonies, viceroys, Latin for vice king. So he reports back, and I have toasted their success. The drawing was changed, with the booze taken out of their hands, and their hands joined like they were broken. By the way, what that's about it. I guess I run out of gas. So, anybody have any questions? Any questions? How did I get started doing this? I had a job working for the state of Pennsylvania, and I had delusions of grandeur. I was initially interviewed to be the director of the tourism bureau and promote the travel and tourism in the state. And here, they gave the job to somebody else. So I accepted the job. I had a good time doing this. It's another story. But I belonged to an organization of travel writers. We had a convention that went from, we would meet all over the world. Patricia and I went to all sorts of good places. For the year of the bicentennial, it was all the U.S. It started in Boston, down in Philly, and D.C. So I went to the Boston part, and I picked up, this was 1976, so I picked up, or 75, picked up the Boston Globe as I'm watching TV. A new show had just started, called Saturday Night Live. Turner, they had a Muppets on it. They had this cartoon on the front page, just for the bicentennial, called Yankee Almanac. It was really well done, cute. It had these big stories that done with humor and light. I said, I can do that. I got a promotion with the state. Little light. So I worked up about 4 or 5 of them, and I took them to the higher up. Well, they hired a guy from out of state for the job. So he comes to me and says, well, the Secretariat powers to be were quite impressed with your Congress. How are you going to handle that? Don't worry about it. You're the boss. You tell me what to do. However, I want a memo signed by you and everybody else involved. So I could do this in my own time and charge the newspapers. The state was nice with the memo, and that was my ticket out. So I lasted 2 more years. But the thing that finally did it for me, that says, do not belong here, Patrick, was I sort of sold my soul to the state. I was going for my master's degree at Syracuse, and it was a program where you go in the summertime for 2 weeks, and then a weekend in New York City or something. Well, now big shots. Now it's a weekend in London, France. Anyhow, it was just starting out. So, I wanted to, do these 2 weeks, but I didn't want it to count as vacation time. So I agreed to do artwork for the state, tourism bureau. So one day they come to me, without consulting me, like, who am I in? I just said, dog face. And they had held a statewide contest for a state slogan. The state slogan that they're trying to compete with Virginia, which had the Virginia's for lovers. It's for lovers. And that caught on everywhere. So we're gonna have one for Pennsylvania. They came up with a winner. Higher up called me in, he says, "We got a winner here." And here it is. Pennsylvania, ... naturally. I took a look at that. Now, I'm this eccentric character, but I kept files of what every state is doing. And I find out what they're doing, and I did something there I'd never heard of. Like I was the first guy to promote a trip across the state to haunted places you can visit. And then I did another one on Take Your Nose on a tour of Pennsylvania. All places that have aromas, like the town of Hershey, or all those various gardens, Hollywood gardens. So anyhow, anyhow, they wanted me to do this thing. Pennsylvania, naturally. That's fine, but someone's already using it. Now, this is statewide. What state is using it? What state is using it? I don't know. Somebody's using it. This is, find out what state is using it, and we'll change it. Sir, Mr. Director, Mr. Secretary, here's how it's gonna go down. I'm gonna letter this T-shirt after you write this memo saying I'm not gonna be fired once the governor makes a fool out of himself. And the governor's gonna unveil a T-shirt on nationwide TV. And the next day, he's gonna get a phone call from the state that's already using it, saying, "What's the idea using our slogan for your slogan? For your slogan?" Yeah, just do it. So I did. Governor goes on TV. Governor's phone rings the next day. Governor Vermont, what are you doing using our slogan? Turn there on. I didn't want to hang around. I figured my IQ's were pretty tough. So that was the end of my stupid talk. And anyway, I started doing these common strips. I did, what you may not know is, I ended up having a lot of guys working for me. One guy was Lauren Rocco's nephew. And they were illustrators from all over the country. I would give them the script and they would do it. Some guys would do the pencils, other guys would do the ink. Because I was able to sell the idea to Texas and then to Texas, New York, Big Apple, Albany, New York City, and then flying into Washington D.C. to Washington Post, Flashbacks. Flashbacks I did with most of you. I have some of these in book form. Flashbacks in there. I don't know if I have any in New York. So anyway, that's about it for my sordid career. Question?
What's your favorite Pennsylvania book? I know there's a
Like
lot.
asking a parent, who's your favorite child? Have to think about that.
Okay.
had one. And you should think about that for historical mark, I should say. On Black Jack Crawford, the poet scout from Minersville. I have a bunch of information on him. Black Jack Crawford. He was a contemporary of yes.
What year did you say the Pennsylvania profiles ran?
1976 to 15 years. You figure it out. I'm not good at this. I know 2 business yes.
Do you ever draw yourself into one of your
Sometimes
stories?
when I want an ugly guy. Right there. Look at it.
You just did
Yeah,
that.
here we go. Actually,
You did here, on the cover.
yeah, I got nothing.
You got a picture, you're smoking a pipe there.
Yeah, right. So it's start giving me headaches. Yeah, like I said, that's one of them. What we would do as a cartoonist, you always have a mirror for facial expressions of whatever character you're talking about. Yes?
What did the public think about the Declaration of Independence when it was published?
Well, I didn't get any mail. That ran, actually, it ran over several years. Because every 4th of July, every various holidays, you want to run a story that coincides with that. So I would do snippets every so often. The last part ended with its travels everywhere. How it ended up back in D.C. It's traveled on, the Declaration traveled on every mode of transportation except an aircraft. I think that was deliberate in case the plane went down and you're done. If the train crashed, dig it out of the wreckage. Oh, yes, sir.
Did you ever do a profile on Matthias Baldwin?
I'm pretty sure that was, he's in volume 4.
No, he was the locomotive guy.
Yeah,
He built
yeah.
Baldwin Locomotive Works.
Yeah. I'm
You know-
pretty sure I did.
You know what his other big thing was? He was an abolitionist. So it's really funny to go see these memes where the young woke people have defaced his statue. Imagine, here's a guy who was against slavery, and they go and, you know, and then,
By the way, they have these very Civil War monuments. We have one in Lancaster Square. It was always Columbia. It was on the top. And south, they have their theirs. And the one in the south, theirs faces, she faces south. And in the north, she faces north. But that wasn't originally the idea. The way the story goes, when they were doing the one in Lancaster, here's a little Civil War veteran to show up at all the meetings. Finally, to find a site that, you know, ours down there, we have a statue, each one of the serves Navy, artillery, infantry, cavalry on each corner. And on the top is Columbia. But the argument is which way does she face? East, where we came from, west, where the future is. So the friend that said, let's let the Civil War prisoner behind. Let him decide. He goes, I don't give a goddamn what direction she faces, as long as her ass faces south. That's why you fight when you go. Yeah.
You said it, I did.
Any other questions for Mr. Reynolds? He has some merchandise for sale over there. The Historical Society, if you didn't sign in, please sign in, it's just the way the application account, put an email there. If you'd like to join, it's only $20 a year. We have some donation jars around. We have some merchandise for the Historical Society that's for sale also. Again, our next talk will be August 20th, Scott and Harry talking about the oversight railroad system. And thank you again to Mr. Pat Reynolds. If you brought something you'd like to get signed, he said he'd be happy to sign it.